This is the Great Vocal Majority Podcast. Hey everybody, it's Tony Conespati, and this is the Great Vocal Majority Podcast, volume number 59, that I've entitled Where We've Been and Where We Are and Where We're Going. I think it's important that we start out with where we've been and examine that pretty closely. In every election since Barack Obama won the presidency in 2008, the Democratic Party has lost ground. By 2010, the Democrats lost a total of 70 seats in the House and Senate, along with control of the majority of state legislative chambers and governorships. Even at the local level, Democrats saw their hold on elected offices slip to a low not seen in nearly a century. So what was the cause of this? Democrats believed it was the personal animus against America's first African American president. In a word, racism. But was that really it? Liberal pundits and politicians pointed to overwhelmingly white opposition to Obama. But did that necessarily mean the opposition was based in race? Among blacks, Obama enjoyed almost unanimous support. So it stood to reason that any opposition to Obama would lack much, if any, black support. Rather than Obama's opposition being based in race, it appeared that his support, at least among blacks, was certainly based in it. The Democrats made an almost unprecedented gross miscalculation, assuming opposition to Obama was primarily racial and not policy-driven. Now, surely, there were people who opposed Obama's policies purely because of his race. I'm sure of that. And there should be no misunderstanding about that. But the problem came in assuming that the vast majority of that opposition was based in anything but policy. After all, nearly half of all white voters cast their vote for Obama in 2008. The reversal from support to opposition can't be explained by racism. It has to be policy. Democrats miscalculated by not understanding this, and they paid a heavy price for it in 2010. The Democrats also made up other excuses for their losses in 2010, namely gerrymandering and voter turnout. Now, both had some element of truth, but really, were they the primary cause of their losses? And now here again, as with the racial excuse, Democrats miscalculated the anger of the electorate at what they interpreted as a betrayal by Obama and the Democrats in terms of policy versus promises made. Had the 2010 losses resulted from low voter turnout in an off-year election, then 2012, a presidential election year, should have delivered a different result. But instead of clawing back any significant amount of those 2010 losses, Democrats won only a handful of seats back. Further, the 2010 losses, had they been a result of gerrymandering, it still didn't explain why Republicans continued to gain ground in statewide elections for senator, governor, and offices like attorney general or secretary of state. Democrats continued to make gerrymandering and turnout their arguments heading into the 2014 election, and again, lost big. This time, they yielded control of the Senate to the Republicans and even more governorships in state legislative chambers. Heading into the 2016 election, the true Democratic Party strategy became much clearer. Basically, they were giving up on the white middle-class voters altogether. And in favor of them, they anticipated a demographic shift in the country to Latin American voters. Now, Democrats, who have always favored granting amnesty to illegal aliens, saw that as a quick fix, a quick way back to political power and even dominance. They even had a sizable share of the Republicans on their side in the House because they represented commercial interests of the Chamber of Commerce who were looking for cheap and unskilled labor. Democrat policies of government safety nets and dependency programs, they felt would be enough to lure desperately destitute Latin Americans to come to America. In fact, of the illegal alien population in the country today, 70% of them already receive some form of government assistance. Hundreds of cities around the country have enacted sanctuary laws, which either limited or even in some cases forbade cooperation with federal immigration authorities, even if those authorities were seeking out violent criminal suspects or drug gang members. Again, the Democrats appeared to have miscalculated, but it appeared to be very little anyone could do about it because the election of Hillary Clinton seemed inevitable. At this point, it would be useful to step back and remind everyone that the issue of immigration has always inflamed passions in American people, and it's no different today. The passion today, however, is not directed at the illegal immigrants themselves. Not really. Most are decent, religious, industrious, and hardworking family people, and I think most people recognize that, including Donald Trump. But rather, the passion and even anger is being directed at the class of politicians who are clearly intent upon placing the interests of those illegal aliens in the country on a par with American citizens and sometimes even ahead of the interests of American citizens. It appeared to a great many Americans in 2016 and even more today in 2018 that the Democrats in Congress and even some Republicans want to nullify the political voice of American citizens when it comes to the issue of immigration by granting amnesty, citizenship, and voting rights to people who have illegally entered the United States. This was the predicate for the candidacy of Donald Trump. That's what I wanted to go through this to explain where we have been. Make no mistake about it, Donald Trump knew tens of millions of Americans were feeling ignored by their elected leadership in Washington. The issue is so much more serious than the entrenched power structure inside the Washington Beltway could even fathom. They're in a bubble. The American economy has been in a slow growth slog since the end of the 2008 recession. Millions of unskilled and less educated people remained unemployed while millions of high-skilled, high-wage jobs could not be filled. A policy granting amnesty to millions of unskilled people would only encourage more of them to come. And that would create an even wider gap between the jobs that are open and the skills needed and the kind of people who are unemployed. If America elected Hillary Clinton, we would be heading in that direction where that disparity would have increased because her immigration policy would have allowed these people to come. That would be the wrong direction. But almost miraculously, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton and immediately went to work on the immigration issue, which was really why he was elected. Let's not forget something else very important. The United States is more than $20 trillion in debt. And so far, under President Trump, that situation isn't getting any better. Bringing more illegal aliens into the United States would only make the problem worse because so many of them are dependent on government assistance. President Trump is attempting to stop the flow by adopting a policy of strict enforcement, which really looks to discourage people from illegally entering the United States or overstaying their visas. He has proposed other measures which look like common sense to most people, but to Democrats who have lost their grip on power, sound more like an existential threat to their party. Give you examples. Ending chain migration, merit-based immigration, which focuses on skills, and a well-policed and maintained border wall with Mexico. All of that are considered threats to the Democrats' desires to ascend back into power. It is in this vein that Democrats and their allies in the media have amped up the rhetoric against the president. But the rhetoric against Trump and the Republicans didn't need any amping up. The inflammatory rhetoric has already led to the attempted assassination of more than a dozen Republican congressmen and their staff in a shooting that nearly killed Majority Whip Steve Scalise. Now, with increasing frequency, the leftists in the media are drawing comparisons between Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler and the Republicans and Nazis. This is so wrong. It's so offensive. It's beyond the pale. It's as if Democrats have learned nothing from their electoral losses over the last 9 years, and they're continuing to place all of their bets on race and hate. President Trump has not broken any law. He is following the law. In the most recent situation, where he had the border agents separate children from people claiming to be their parents or relatives, but couldn't prove it, the president was protecting children from human traffickers, which had been a problem under Obama. Did you hear anybody report that in the media? Very unlikely. It's understandable why so many Americans dislike President Trump. There's much to not like about him on a personal level, but we are not supposed to select or support our leaders on personalities alone. That leads to a cult of personality. And we saw that under Obama, where school children were singing hymns to him. It's the importance of policy that we have to focus on. But when you have a cult of personality, the importance of policy is diminished, and the force of personality and personal charisma is magnified. We need to support leaders with policies we favor, and the ability to get those policies instituted. We should judge politicians on their results, not their intentions or their likability. President Trump has kept faith with his promises, delivered on them where possible, and the country's doing better because of it. Does anybody really doubt that? Is President Trump squeaky clean? Oh, hell no, he's not. Does he exaggerate, embellish, and say untrue things? Yes, he sure does. Usually when President Trump exaggerates or embellishes and says untrue things, it's really about his own ego, and he's doing it in order to save face. It's a face-saving kind of mechanism. Now, I'm not here to try to make excuses for the president, because, like I said, there are a lot of things about his personality that people are entirely justified in not liking. What I'm really here to talk about is the over-the-top treatment of this president in a way that is so hostile and so dangerous that it could lead to a lot of violence, and that is the last thing we need in this country right now. We don't need to have political violence just because people on the left have lost their minds about this president. I want you to really honestly think about this. Can any of us say that President Trump has been treated fairly by many of his critics? This is important because it really touches on where we're going in this country right now. Can anyone honestly say that President Trump hasn't been made the object of some of the most hate-filled and vile comments ever directed at a president? Now, I know people felt badly or angrily about President Obama, but I can't remember people ever threatening his family and people in Hollywood, one after another, talking about raping the First Lady and kidnapping their children and putting them in with child molesters and pedophiles. I mean, where did we hear this? During any previous presidency, Barack Obama or anybody else? I can't think of any. Ladies and gentlemen, respectfully, I don't believe there's any doubt that this president has been more poorly treated than any president in our lifetimes, at the very least. Can you think of any presidential administration who had cabinet-level officials harassed in public places and even in their own homes? I can't. Can you think of any first family that had to endure threats of physical violence from people in the news media or the entertainment industry? Threats to children as young as 4 years old, as in the case of Don Jr.'s daughter, Chloe? Again, I can't. Democrats are going to do what they do. They have never been known for their moderation in tone, despite virtue signaling and morally preening whenever it suits them politically. Now, I'm addressing this to rank-and-file Democrats, neighbors, people who are my friends and family, people I love. I'm also directing it to Americans on the left and the right who think somehow they have a moral duty not just to oppose this president, but to hate him, everything about him, and his family with such intensity that they want physical harm to come to him and them. I'm profoundly disappointed and saddened by those people. Criticize his policies if you disagree with them, and you should have a field day doing it. Every president deserves to have his policies scrutinized and criticized if it's what you believe. But enough with the personality stuff. Enough with just hating Trump because he's who he is, or hating his family because they are who they are. Enough with that. That is going to lead us into a terrible place as a country. We should not be doing that. We should be more civil with each other, and we should not be demonizing one another in a way that could lead to violence, and in fact has already led to violence. For the great vocal majority, I'm Tony Codispoti. Thanks for listening, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel where you can get more information like this if you're interested. Thank you.